The theater lights dimmed as a nervous young boy stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage, his small frame nearly swallowed by the size of the moment. His name was Daniel, a 12-year-old from a small fishing village in the Philippines, who had traveled across the ocean with nothing more than a tattered backpack, a second-hand hoodie, and a dream he held closer than breath itself. For years, Daniel had sung on street corners to help his mother earn enough coins for rice, his voice carrying over the noise of tricycles and market chatter. He never had music lessons, never touched a piano, yet his voice had become his only hope, a secret gift he guarded through hardship and hunger. As he stood trembling under the spotlight, the judges looked at him with curiosity, and the audience, not yet knowing his story, waited in restless silence. His hands gripped the microphone so tightly his knuckles turned pale, and for a fleeting second, he wondered if his voice would fail him. The memory of his mother's tired eyes flashed before him, reminding him why he was here, not for fame, not for glory, but for a chance to rewrite their lives. With one deep breath, Daniel closed his eyes and began to sing, his voice rising with a raw purity that silenced the crowd. Every note carried the weight of his struggles, the warmth of his dreams, and the quiet strength of a boy who had learned resilience before he had even learned to write. By the time the first verse ended, something unexplainable had already begun to stir inside the theater. As Daniel's voice soared higher, the air inside the theater shifted from casual curiosity to a hush so heavy that even the sound of breathing seemed too loud. His voice was not polished like those of trained singers, instead, it was raw, trembling at the edges yet filled with an honesty that cut through the noise of the world. Each lyric carried a piece of his life, the nights he fell asleep hungry, the mornings he woke before sunrise to help his mother sell fish, and the countless times he sang beneath the stars to drown out the ache of poverty. The audience leaned forward, their eyes widening, some already brimming with tears, as though they could hear the story behind every note. The judges, who had listened to thousands of performers before, sat utterly still, caught off guard by the power of something so unrefined yet so deeply human. Daniel, though nervous, began to lose himself in the music, forgetting the cameras, the stage, the millions who might be watching. In his mind, he was back home by the shore, singing to the sea while his mother smiled through exhaustion, reminding him that hope could live even in the darkest corners. When his voice cracked slightly, instead of faltering, it carried more truth, piercing hearts with its sincerity. A soft sob echoed from somewhere in the audience, and the moment grew heavier, warmer, almost sacred. No one was merely watching a performance anymore, they were witnessing courage unfold. In the purest form. And as Daniel's song carried on, it became clear to everyone present that this was not just a boy chasing a dream, it was a soul fighting for survival through the only gift he had been given. By the time Daniel reached the chorus, the audience was no longer simply spectators, they were passengers on the journey of a boy whose voice was bigger than his years, his pain, and even his dreams. Tears glistened on the cheeks of strangers who, moments ago, had never heard his name. One of the judges leaned forward, hand pressed against her chest as though trying to hold her heart together. Another whispered something inaudible, stunned by the way a child could carry so much weight in so fragile a frame. But Daniel was unaware of the impact he was leaving, his eyes were shut, his body swaying gently with each note, as if the music itself was guiding him to places words could never reach. The lyrics spoke of holding on when the world lets go, of finding light in endless darkness, and though the words were simple, his delivery turned them into a prayer for everyone listening. Just then, his voice cracked again, but instead of breaking the moment, it deepened it, reminding the room that he was not perfect, just painfully real. A hush fell so complete that when a single tear rolled down his cheek, it seemed louder than thunder. The cameras zoomed in, capturing not just a performance but a revelation. Greatness was not always polished, sometimes it was born in brokenness. Then, as the final notes trembled from his lips, Daniel opened his eyes for the first time since the song began, and saw the entire audience rising to their feet, clapping through their tears, their faces reflecting the truth he had always known deep inside. Even the smallest voices could carry the heaviest truths. The theater erupted into applause so thunderous it felt like the very walls were trembling. Daniel blinked rapidly, unsure if the standing ovation was real or just another dream from which he would soon wake. For a moment, he froze, clutching the microphone to his chest as though it were the only anchor keeping him steady in the tidal wave of sound. The judges, moved beyond words, rose to their feet alongside the audience, their eyes shimmering with tears they could not hold back. One judge leaned toward the others, whispering, "This boy doesn't just sing, he heals." Another wiped her eyes openly, smiling through her tears. Daniel, overwhelmed, gave a small bow, but before he could fully process what was happening, the crowd began chanting, "Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer!" The sound filled the room like a heartbeat, each repetition stronger than the last. Then, with trembling hands, one of the judges reached forward and slammed the golden buzzer. In an instant, golden confetti rained down from the ceiling, swirling like falling stars around Daniel. His mouth fell open in shock as he dropped to his knees, overcome with emotion, his tears mingling with laughter that poured from a place of pure relief and gratitude. The confetti stuck to his hair, his hoodie, even his wet cheeks, painting him in the glow of triumph. The audience clapped harder, their cheers echoing like a symphony of love and support. Daniel looked up at the judges' table, his lips trembling as if to say thank you, but the words caught in his throat. He didn't need to speak. At that moment, everyone understood, this was more than a victory on a stage, it was a miracle unfolding before their very eyes. As Daniel stood amid the golden rain, he felt the weight of every sacrifice that had brought him here. He thought of his mother, waiting back home, who had worked until her hands blistered just so he could afford the shoes on his feet. He thought of the nights he had sung softly to his younger sister to lull her to sleep, promising that one day their lives would change. The golden buzzer wasn't just for him, it was for them, for every meal skipped, every tear hidden, every prayer whispered into the night. Backstage, producers rushed forward to embrace him, but Daniel's eyes kept darting toward the audience, almost as if he was searching for her face, the one who had believed in him when the world had not. A camera captured his expression, raw and unguarded, and millions watching at home would later say it was the face of hope itself. The judges stepped forward, one of them kneeling beside him as confetti continued to fall, saying, "Daniel, your voice is not just talent, it's a gift from above, and today, you shared it with the world." The crowd roared in agreement, their clapping carrying the weight of shared humanity, proof that no matter the distance or differences, music had the power to unite. In that moment, Daniel no longer felt like the poor boy from the fishing village, he felt like someone who belonged, someone worthy of being heard. His heart pounded in rhythm with the cheers, and for the first time in his young life, he allowed himself to believe that perhaps destiny was finally within reach. When the stage lights dimmed and the applause finally softened, Daniel walked off with trembling legs, his heart still racing from the moment that had just unfolded. He clutched a small piece of golden confetti in his hand, vowing to keep it forever as proof that dreams could rise from even the humblest beginnings. Backstage, he was met with hugs from strangers, crew members, fellow contestants, and even the host, each telling him how his voice had touched their souls. For Daniel, it was overwhelming, yet strangely comforting to know that his pain had turned into something beautiful for others. That night, as he sat alone in the quiet, he thought about how the world often saw poverty as weakness, but he now understood it had been his greatest teacher. Hunger had sharpened his resilience, hardship had deepened his empathy, loss had strengthened his faith. And now, music had become his bridge from despair to hope. Across the globe, millions of viewers replayed his performance, parents hugging their children tighter, dreamers daring to believe again, and strangers shedding tears for a boy they had never met. His journey was no longer just his own, it had become a story of perseverance for everyone who had ever felt small, overlooked, or forgotten. Daniel knew the road ahead would still be difficult, but he also knew one unshakable truth: the smallest voice can carry the loudest message when it speaks from the heart. And so, with hope burning brighter than fear, he whispered to himself a promise that echoed louder than any applause: this is only the beginning.